show, your journey to empowerment. This is Shanika Flynn. We are so happy to have you joining us today on this beautiful Thursday. Yes, it is dreary outside, but that's okay. It's still a beautiful Thursday, right? Well, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday we have experts coming in and joining us to talk about issues that impact us both directly and indirectly, and they impact our community. And that is exactly what we are doing today. Today we have Susan Cottrell here visiting our station. Now, let me start this a little bit differently than I normally do. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Susan Cottrell. First, before we jump in to this conversation, the topic of today's conversation is Love Thy Neighbor as Yourself, the LGBTQI community. Yes, love thy neighbor as yourself, the LGBTQI community. This is a part one of a two-part series. Today we are featuring Susan Cottrell. Also, let me be very clear from WVKO's perspective. We are not condoning, endorsing, or encouraging the lifestyle behavior of the LGBTQI community. We are increasing conversation and understanding so that not only we can understand each other's perspectives, which allows us to love one another without judgment. That is the purpose of this conversation. We do invite you to call in with your comments and your thoughts and any questions you may have for Susan. The telephone number is going to be 614-824-2139 or 614-824-2336. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. We are very glad to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So Susan Cottrell, she is the prominent voice for faith parents of LGBTQI children. She was recently featured on ABC's 2020 Nightline and Good Morning America. She is an international speaker, author, and spiritual director. Now, through her nonprofit organization, FreedHearts, Susan champions the LGBTQI community and families with her characteristic tenderheartedness and her zealous challenges. Now, let me further continue with letting you know that Susan not only champions it, but she also talks about and insists on the love of God and of others. That is the foundation of our faith. She has spent 25 years in the non-affirming evangelical church, and she's also the founder and president of FreedHearts. With that being said, congratulations to you. She also has her Master's of Arts in Theological Studies. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And she has served as vice president of PFLAG in Texas. She is also the author of 2 books, Mom, I'm Gay, Loving Your LGBTQ Children or Child and Strengthening Your Faith, as well as True Colors, Celebrating the Truth and Beauty of the Real You. She is married and has been married for 30 years.
Yes.
With her husband, Rob, correct?
Yes.
And she has 5 children, 2 of whom are in the LGBTQI community. She lives in Austin, Texas. So again, thank you very much, Susan, for joining us.
My pleasure.
We are very glad to have you here today. And again, this conversation is to increase understanding among our community members and to hopefully increase conversations and love. That is why we are talking about loving thy neighbor as thyself. Now, tell us a little bit about your background, not just what I said in your bio, but talk to us a little bit about how you even became so involved in the LGBTQI community.
Well, as you said, I was in the evangelical church for 25 years. We raised the kids there. Mm-hmm. And although the church never talked about gay people, we knew the position. We just knew. It's kind of in the air. And then our daughter came out as bisexual. And we said, okay, we've got to take a brand new look at this. We loved her completely and embraced her completely. I mean, she's our daughter. But what it did for us was it drove us into a soul-searching time with God to say, what's the deal here? Because after our daughter came out and we embraced her fully, she asked us even months later, are you sure you won't reject me? Are you sure you and Dad won't reject me even later? And I said, no, we already haven't rejected you. We've embraced you. Why would you ask that 4 times? And she said, because I've seen it happen. I've seen parents kick their kids out. And I was shocked and heartbroken. I didn't know that happened. They don't talk about that. And so I knew that the church is in real trouble on this issue. They're not treating it as they treat, even if they think it's a sin, they're not treating it like any other sin as they claim they are. But you don't throw your child out for other reasons. So we really pressed into it, my husband and I, with a lot of prayer and a lot of study and a lot of reading. And we realized that the position the church has taken is not the full picture at all, that the verses don't say what they're said to mean about it.
What do you mean by that?
That the verses, there are like 6 or 7, depending on how you look at them, verses that are said to condemn homosexuality. But when we looked at them, they're talking about very different things. They're not the slam dunk of condemnation that they're presented to be. And many people, when they refer to them, don't even know what the verses are. They haven't studied them. They just cite them like it's a slam dunk. But as we studied, we realized it really wasn't. But even beyond that, whether or not they were, the way the church is responding to those people is terribly unchristian, unbiblical, unloving. You throw your 14-year-old out of the house because he said, "Mom, I think I'm attracted to boys." There's no Jesus in that whatsoever.
Okay, so we are not, I understand that you're not saying that all churches treat their members of their congregation that way, but through your experience, you have seen that to happen, and therefore that is where your perspective comes from.
Yes.
So let's go back to the scripture's perspective before we move on to the church and the community perspective and how they perceive those of the LGBTQI community and treat them, and that perspective. So one of the things that goes through my mind, and I thought about this yesterday and today, was Romans 1:27.
Yes.
The New Living Translation talks about, "And the men, instead of having normal sexual relations with women, burned with lust for each other. Men did shameful things with other men, and as a result of this sin, they suffered within themselves the penalty they deserved." Now, that suffering may be relative, especially when you think about each individual's perspective. But because it is in the Word, it is part of the Bible, that means it is. One would be able to come back and say, well, it says right here, this is just an example. This is a sin.
Right.
What is your perspective on that, whether it be the verse or other verses that references any kind of homosexuality or any aspect of it as a sin?
Okay. You picked the best verse because this is the one people struggle with the most. I could spend the rest of the program talking about just this one verse. I won't do that, but I could. There's so much to it. So, first of all, the word homosexuality was invented in the 1800s. It's not an original word. And it was added to the Bible in 1946. Yes.
Oh.
Your face is shocked, but that's true. Because it's not talking about homosexuality like two men of equal status who love each other and want to commit to each other. That word wasn't in there. It uses 2 other words, malakoi and arsenokoitai, and you can go look them up in the Greek if you want to. But what they more refer to is these straight, presumably straight married men, married to women, but they're having sex with their slave boys. That was terribly common in that culture. And, it's essentially rape because it's underage boys. They have no choice in the matter. They have to submit to their master's sex with them. So it's essentially pedophilia and rape. That's one reference that is included in those terms. Another is the temple prostitution that was common. So they'd go have sex with temple prostitutes, males and females, as part of their idolatrous worship. So Paul is referencing all of that when he uses that verse. That's the first part of this. But the second part is that all of Romans 1, he's making a vice list. It's a rhetorical device. It's how he spoke commonly, Paul. He'd make this vice list of all these bad things, and the idea was people would say, oh my gosh, yes, these people, I can't believe it. And then in Romans 2, he drops the hammer. And he says, so were some of you. And he's convicting them with this whole vice list he just listed out. So and he says, you condemn yourselves by judging these people. So if you read Romans 1 and don't read Romans 2, you're doing exactly what he said don't do. So that one is, I think it's harder for people to understand because they don't understand the whole context of the rhetorical device, the argument that Paul is setting up. But he's trying to pull out these things that they would find reprehensible, like these men having sex with their slave boys, or temple prostitution, and all the idolatry that happened there. And he's getting them riled up into a frenzy against that and many other things in that vice list. And then he's slamming it down by saying, you, by judging these people, condemn yourselves. So for us to use that to condemn a group of people, whether, even though they're not even related to what he was talking about, but to condemn those people is really doing exactly what he said don't do by judging this group of people. Did you follow all that?
Yes,
Does that
I
make
understand.
sense? Yeah.
Now let's go more into the belief and the belief of the LGBTQI community, the lifestyle, before we actually go into how they are treated and increasing this conversation.
Okay.
Now, what are your thoughts with regard to homosexuality or any aspect of that lifestyle and belief being a sin, or not necessarily a sin, being natural, you are born that way,
right,
versus it is a choice that you make.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me pause for a moment on the word lifestyle. That if you're not in the community, you don't realize that's an offensive word. Mm-hmm. But if I talked about the heterosexual lifestyle, would I mean a prostitute? Would I mean, Billy Graham and his wife? What is the heterosexual lifestyle? What depends on the person? So there's not a lifestyle that's homosexual. There are men who have sex, a lot with different partners, or women, and women do the same thing. Or there are people that are monogamous with their partner for lifetime. So lifestyle is really a pejorative word.
So are you referencing more of it's a belief, it's who you are, it is just who you are?
Well, that's a different thing too. Gay. Are you gay? Are you LGBTQI? So, yes, that's what I mean by that. So it's not a lifestyle, it's a person who is what they are. Mm-hmm. And you said, do I think it's natural or they were born that way? And from anything that we can assess from anybody we talk about this with who is gay, it is how they were born. There's just no choosing it. I mean, I never remember choosing being straight. I just remember my first crush in 4th grade, I think it was. Mm-hmm. The guy was really cute, right? Mm-hmm. And I had a feeling about him that I didn't have about everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't ever choose that. And all the LGBTQI people that I talk to, they don't ever express that they chose it. Mm. And anybody reasonable, just has to say, so to choose to be rejected by your church, your family, disparaged in society, condemned by your pastor, that wouldn't be a very good choice. If you had a choice to make, mm-hmm, people wouldn't make that choice. So for all intents and purposes, as much as anybody can tell, no choice was involved. It just is who they are.
Okay. So it is your belief and the experience of those that you have been exposed to, yes, within the community, that it is something that they are just, yes, born. That is who they are. There is no choice to it.
Right.
Okay. What have you found to be, through your conversations, various people that you've spoken to nationally, as well as the experiences of your children,
yes,
what have you found to be the biggest challenge, and how have they overcome it? How have you talked to your children about overcoming, mm-hmm,
it? The biggest challenge, I think, is being condemned for something they have no control over. So they discover that they have these feelings they never asked for, they never chose, and they know that now they are part of a really hated community. If we can, that sounds like a strong word, but they hear from the pulpit in many churches that this group of people of whom they realize they are going to hell. God hates them. They're an abomination. They should be, undergo some kind of change so they won't be that way, or deny themselves who they are. All kinds of ramifications come down from discovering this thing about themselves that they never chose. And so the thing that they really struggle with the most is self-hatred, that from what they experience from those around them.
Wow. You know what? I definitely want us to continue this conversation and continue your point, because one, I'm actually surprised to hear you say that. I thought that maybe the biggest issue or challenge would be basically how they are treated by others that don't accept them or believe in that community. I did not expect you to talk about anything about their self-worth or self-esteem. So stay with us.
Okay.
We have so much more to talk about. So stick around. Listeners, you stick around as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you continue to stay with us, because this is Susan continue with the conversation that she was talking with us about with regard to the biggest challenge that those in the LGBTQI community experience. Can you go ahead and elaborate with that, Susan? And caller, if you can hear me on the air, if we've hung up on you, there seems to be technical problems, so feel free to call back.
Yes, I said that the biggest problem they face is self-hatred, and that seemed counterintuitive, you said, but I think of it as any group that's been marginalized, and I think of girls and women who are over apologetic compared to men because of how they have been put in a certain place in society, right? And so they internalize feelings about women, even though that's themselves, that men don't internalize about themselves. Or the African American community, there's often self-loathing in them because of how society treats them. And so you said you would think the biggest problem is how society treats LGBTQI people, and that's true, but what it turns into is self-loathing, self-hatred, and suicidal thoughts. Most of the people that I know of who are LGBTQI have at some point in their lives struggled with suicidal thoughts.
Okay. Well, we actually have another caller as well. So we've got two callers, so we're going to go ahead and let them call in and ask their questions, and hopefully this is going to be able to work this time.
Okay.
Hello, caller. Caller, you're on the air. Okay, I guess not. Please continue. I don't know why this is not working, but please continue.
Okay, and we can back up from that and say, what is the job that Jesus gave us? He was asked, what is the greatest command? And he said, love. Love God and love others as yourself. And everything else will fit under that. But many people in the church that doesn't affirm LGBTQI people, it seems like they maybe heard that Jesus' great command was correct others. But that's not what he said. He said love others. And that, if we get back to that, then all the rest of the law and prophets, as Jesus said, all the rest of the Bible will fit under that. And what does love look like? He told us. Treating others the way you want to be treated. Loving your neighbor as yourself. Doing to others what you would want done to you. And nobody would want to be kicked out of their home. Nobody wants to be kicked out of their community. Nobody wants to be told from the pulpit they're going to hell. And even if you think that's true, that's not what Jesus said to do to each other. So to get back to the basics of loving each other will go a very long way toward healing this fracture between many in the church in the LGBTQI community.
Okay. That is definitely one of the reasons why we are having this conversation. We want to increase the conversation among all of our community members because we are all living here together. And we want to make sure that we are loving each other despite lifestyles, despite who people believe that they are. That is between them and God.
Yes.
Not us among people. So with regard to your children.
Can I add one more thing to that before?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The best way to love somebody is to get to know them without, just go with an open heart and get to know them, have coffee with them, talk to them, hear their story, rather than going in to download your story to that, like, you know, your correction to them and what you think is right for them, is to listen to their story. That's how you love each other.
Say that again, please.
To get to know people in this community and hear their story and hear their struggles and their heartaches and hear that they prayed ever since they realized it. They were having these feelings. They prayed, God, please make this not true. Please take this away from me. Virtually everybody I talked to has prayed that prayer, and their parents have prayed that prayer. And God does not answer that prayer. In all of my experience, God did not change the orientation. And so we have to say, maybe God has a different agenda than we do. But to hear that story and hear somebody's struggle and hear how they prayed and how they've hated this about themselves, it gives you a different compassion for them than if you just, come in with your already agenda to tell them what they should be doing.
Okay. We have a caller, so we are going to try this again and hopefully it will come through. Okay. Give me 2 seconds. WBKO. Caller, are you on the air? Yeah, well, Okay, so were you surprised when your children came out to you? Were you surprised?
Totally surprised.
So you did not have any idea beforehand?
No idea. Even looking back, I had no idea. And my older daughter came out as bisexual, and she was attracted to boys too. But I had no idea that was coming. So you just have to take it for what it is. And then my youngest daughter came out, and I think many parents of multiple gay kids, when the second one comes out, you say, okay, it is us.
Okay.
But we realized that it wasn't us.
It wasn't you, of course.
Yeah.
Caller, can you hear us? Okay. Talk to us about your organization.
Yeah, so after I realized how many parents, how the church was not dealing well with this, and by the church I mean the conservative church that believes this is a sin, most of them are not really dealing with this well. They're not providing community and love and support for these people. So I just began with a blog post. I like to say that God tricked me into it.
He tricked you into it.
Yeah, I wrote this blog post and suddenly it just blew up and all these people started responding to it. And I realized what a huge need there is out there. I mean, I know that right now I'm speaking to the parent who is alone, who feels alone on the journey. They're ashamed because they've been made to feel ashamed by the non-approving culture. And they're shaming their kids because that's what we do. And so it's a real problem. And I had people come out of the woodwork to say, please help me. My daughter came out and I don't know what to do. My son came out and now my husband won't talk to him. I'm afraid my child's going to hell. Or a teenager, a young adult saying, I told my parents and now my mom won't stop crying. This is the kind of need that's out there. And what's needed to answer these things is love, not correction.
Right. Oh, say that again, please.
Yeah. What's needed to answer them is love and not correction. So I started my organization, my husband and I. It's a nonprofit called FreedHearts, FreedHearts.org. We have all kinds of information on there. I've continued with the blog. We have over 600 posts. We have online video courses that I made now, both for parents and also for the LGBTQI community. I have one on there about 49 verses about radical inclusion.
Oh.
That's like 7 times 7 of the so-called clobber passages. I have a book, Mom and Gay, that I wrote for parents. I have a book, True Colors, which is a healing workbook for the LGBTQI community. So there are tons of resources on there. Just go on there. And also we have an online support group for moms and another one for dads. And moms, being more talkative, are that group is a lot bigger than the dads. Dads like to carry everything themselves. But we welcome parents to contact me about getting in those groups. They're secret, so you can't find them. You have to be invited in.
Oh.
But the idea is to provide support for each other because we need it.
We need it.
We need it. Our job is to love. That's our main job as Christians. And Jesus said, they'll know you're my followers by your love, not by your correction, right? Not by your doctrine, not by your correct theology. They'll know you're Christians. They'll know you're my disciples by the love you have for each other. And sometimes people tell you that love looks like, well, I kicked them out because I love them. No. That's not love.
But yeah.
I'm correcting them to death because I love them. No, that's not love either. Love means love that feels like love. And let God correct whatever needs to be corrected.
Let God correct whatever needs to be corrected. That is a great point. Caller, can you hear us? Are you on the air? Guess not.
I'm watching a lot of buttons being pushed and nobody is coming up.
Yeah, I don't know. We are having why we are having problems with this, and we apologize, listeners, because we definitely want to hear from you. So do you find when you were talking to parents that both the men and the women feel the same, or are there differences in how a woman perceives their child who may be gay or lesbian versus the father?
Okay, we've seen everything on the whole spectrum. We've seen women respond on the whole spectrum of, hatefulness toward their child to complete acceptance, and men the same thing. But in general, I would say that men have a harder time. One of the hallmarks when they've studied what cultural perception of manhood is, it includes being a playboy, being dominant, being violent. These are how we characterize manhood in our culture. And one of the hallmarks is disdain for homosexuality. So it's not enough to be straight. You need to disdain homosexuality in our cultural definition of manhood. So it's a really hard thing for men to overcome. And men also in our culture are conditioned to carry everything themselves, to be lone rangers, and when there's a problem and they can't fix it, they really do not like that.
Okay. Caller, we've got you through now. Can you hear us?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Praise God, we can hear you. So glad to have you joining us. Thank you, caller. You are on the air. Please talk to us. Ask your question or give your thoughts.
Well, it's not a thought. It's not a question. It's a thought. I really appreciate young lady being on the air. My name is Pastor B. Been a pastor for 41 years. We've been trying to get you for a while, but this conversation you're having is real strange.
Yes.
And I keep hearing this person talking about God shit, but I must have really ever read the Bible.
Yes, I have.
This type of conversation going on between Abraham and his nephew called Lot. Same thing she talked about now.
Yes.
And in that conversation, there was a country, Solomon and Bachor. And he gave them a chance to correct themselves.
Yes.
He didn't. So finally he told Lot to take all his possessions and leave and don't look back.
Yes. Yes,
At that time, who was his wife was the person of Gomorrah. And as the story goes by, it's in the scripture. She looked back and turned to a pillar of salt. Everybody knew about that.
Yes.
He
Yes.
called it an abomination to him.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Pastor. That's a great verse. You're talking about the Genesis story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's
That was for all time.
Yes, yes.
It wasn't just for then, it's for all time.
Yes. So let me tell you something about that.
I'm trying to bring it back.
Yeah, can I tell you something about that story?
Go ahead.
Okay. What is the sin of Sodom? Right in the Bible, it tells us in Ezekiel, I think it's 16:49, it says, this is the sin of your sister Sodom, that you were overfed, wealthy, self-absorbed, selfish, you didn't welcome the stranger. And so that's why Sodom was destroyed, because of their self-satisfied, overfed, unwelcoming state of how they were. So it has nothing to do with homosexuality. That story's not about homosexuality. Excuse me, let me finish, please. Let me finish, if you don't mind. So it's talking about these men going to, all the men of Sodom going to rape these two visitors. Well, no, all of men in a whole city are gay. It wasn't about being gay. It was about raping the stranger, which was the ancient way of saying, we don't want you here, and we will conquer you if you come. And so, and Ezekiel 16:49 proves that was what was going on. And I think it's a terrible misfortune that sodomite has become the word for gay male sex, when that is not at all what it was talking about. Sorry?
Now, the issue was, why let people keep on talking? I guess we can't talk. Now, he offered his daughters to them. They refused them. They didn't want them women. Then these two men talking about were angels that he sent down. He sent angels down to protect them until he left. And when he left, there was a big explosion.
Yes.
That's when the white of that country turned back and looked.
Yes.
Everybody read that scripture and they knew it. Further on down the line, God hates sin, period.
Yes.
He don't change his mind because of what you think or what I think.
That's exactly right.
Sin, period.
Right. And the sin of how we have treated the gay community.
Where we are now, the way they treated black folks is a disgrace to anybody living on this planet today.
Yes, it is.
Election day, and what about what they did and do just because of the color of their skin?
Oh, I think that got disconnected. But let me just say that if I read you correctly, you said that Lot offered his daughters and they refused him, as though what you're saying is they wanted men, not women. Let me tell you, the women already were there. They weren't strangers. It was the strangers they were wanting to conquest and prove that they were not welcome. The daughters already were part of the community, so they didn't have to do that to them. So it's a whole, I mean, read Ezekiel 16:49 to find out what that verse is really about.
Okay, wonderful. We are going to go back to a quick commercial, and we are going to continue this conversation past 2 o'clock, so make sure you stay right with us. So we have Susan Cottrell with us, and Susan, you were making some very good points during this break. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, just from listening to the last caller, you can hear the trouble it is to try to grasp a different perspective on what people had believed maybe their entire lives, to see a story of Sodom and Gomorrah and believe it means one thing, even though the Bible itself and Ezekiel tells us it means something different. It's very hard to let go of something we've held on to so long. And I want to tell you, when your child comes out, for parents, it is very difficult for them. If they believe it's a sin and they've been told it's a sin and they're, then it's very hard to let God shift our perspective. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Jesus, he shifted people's perspective countless times throughout his whole ministry. And if it means anything to follow Jesus, it means to let him shift your perspective, even on things you deeply hold to be true. But Jesus said, I'll send you a helper who will lead you in all truth. The Holy Spirit will lead you in all truth. So I just plead with parents to seek the Holy Spirit for answers to their questions. Love their children. Let the answers come when they come. But trust God and love their children, because it's very, very clear. If there's anything clear in Scripture, it's that we are to love. Mm-hmm. We're to love our neighbors as ourselves, and that certainly includes our children. And then let God bring answers. That's something we can do.
Absolutely. That is definitely something we can do.
Yes.
Basically, let God do his job.
Yes.
And let us do our job, which is to love one another and pray for one another.
Yes.
Listeners, if you are listening, if you know someone who is a part of the LGBTQI community, or you think that you know someone who is struggling with that, please talk with them. Allow them to communicate with you openly without judgment, and encourage them to not only talk with their pastors, but to go to Susan's website, which is
FreedHearts, hearts that have been freed.org.
FreedHearts.org.
Yes.
Susan, would you like to say anything else, or would you like to let the listeners know additional information that's important for them?
This is a journey that I think God is allowing to come up in our culture. Look how many gay people there are. And if God didn't want them here, you would think God would answer their pleas, their prayers not to be gay anymore. So maybe we need to look at what God may be doing other than that. Please don't sin yourself. Don't be blatantly unloving to people who want to be loved and supported, and Jesus told us to love and support. And let God do whatever God is doing in this culture. So especially if it's your children, you do not want to go in your child's room and find them hanging in the closet. That's happened to far too many people, and you won't see it coming, but you'll see the end result, and then you'll say, I wish I had listened. And it's a serious problem. So please love them now, and let God deal with whatever needs to be dealt with in regard to it.
Wow. And you know what, listeners? Understand that she was talking with parents, but we're actually talking with each and every single one of you, because even if it's not your child, it could just be a friend or someone that you know. But regardless, we are all human, so we would all hate to have our friends, our children, our loved ones hanging in a closet.
Yes.
So please be open to listening to what they have to say, and encouraging them to talk with their pastors, talk with their loved ones, and also feel free to visit freedhearts.org for more information.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Susan. We were so happy to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, too, listeners, for joining us in this conversation.